Hello everyone, today we are going to explore the character of Tywin Lannister, who is undoubtedly complex and profound. Tywin passed away at the age of 58, and his life was filled with twists and challenges. To truly understand his character, we must look back at the storms he weathered in his youth, and the tumultuous years that shaped him. Particularly, his harshness and coldness towards Tyrion conceal the growth of a remarkable military strategist and politician. Compared to Jaime, the responsibilities and pressures Tywin faced were far heavier. In his youth he also experienced many remarkable moments, all of which profoundly influenced his later choices and actions. First of all, Tywin Lannister, who was the Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West, was known as the Laughing Lion. He always wore a smile, giving off a friendly impression. However, during the first 20 years of his leadership, House Lannister gradually fell into decline, reaching an unprecedented low. Tywin's kindness sometimes appeared overly weak. His good-natured demeanor initially encouraged his followers, but over time, they began to realize that the Lord's unconditional tolerance actually masked his incompetence. This character trait rendered him particularly powerless when facing the family's difficulties. The main issues manifest in several ways. Firstly, many families began borrowing money from House Lannister but failed to repay it for a long time. Everyone knew that House Lannister was financially strong, so numerous nobles came to borrow funds, only to delay repayment afterward. Tywin Lannister, however, displayed excessive leniency, casually saying, "Let it go, everyone has their struggles." Secondly, some nobles even chose to pledge their loyalty to House Tyrell. Given that the Westerlands border the Riverlands, some lords in the border castles openly declared their allegiance to the Tyrells, which undoubtedly showed contempt for their own liege lord and should have been punished. The third manifestation is that some of his subordinates have begun to show a strong sense of independence. Although they have not changed their allegiance, they no longer heed the judgments of House Lannister. When faced with orders, they choose to execute them selectively, and even in disputes where they should seek resolution from their liege lord, they resolve matters privately and engage in duels, which is clearly unacceptable and illegal. These phenomena reflect the sharp decline in the prestige of House Lannister. More seriously, at that time, two noble families from the Westerlands joined forces, their power having surpassed that of House Lannister, an unprecedented situation in the history of the Westerlands spanning thousands of years. House Lannister has always held a higher prestige in the Westerlands than other families, even stronger than the Stark, Arryn, and Martell families from the north, consistently playing a dominant role in this land. A situation unprecedented has finally emerged, as the status of House Lannister is challenged by two new noble families, House Reyne and House Tarbeck, which are also related by kinship. The sigil of House Reyne is a red lion, while that of House Lannister is a golden lion, leading to the prominent leader of House Reyne often being referred to as the Red Lion. Although the current Earl of House Tarbeck does not possess significant power, his wife, Ellen Tarbeck, holds considerable prestige. Before marrying into House Tarbeck, she was a daughter of House Reyne, and is thus also known as Ellen Reyne. Notably, Lady Aelin is the sister of the famed Red Priest Roger, further tightening the familial ties between House Reyne and House Tarbeck. Together they have significantly increased their strength, and initially, they even sought financial support from House Lannister. The Tarbeck family's castle, Tarbeck Hall, has a long history but has never been properly maintained. Now, after successfully securing funding from House Lannister, they have finally begun renovations on the castle, breathing new life into it and even hiring many new knights. The number of knights in the family has surged from dozens to hundreds, a considerable force in the Westerlands. Lady Ellen, known for her flamboyant personality, often stirs up trouble, and it is hard to deny her significant responsibility for the subsequent tragedies in the region. Meanwhile, the prestige of House Lannister shows signs of decline, particularly with the marriage alliance in which Tywin Lannister betroths his only daughter Jenna to Aemon Fry of the Riverlands. This news caused a huge uproar at the grand banquet, attended by half of the nobility of the Westerlands. Wald Fry, the father of Aemon Fry, was around 40 years old and had been in the picture for 50 years. As soon as the news broke, several nobles reacted strongly. Among them, Roger Rayne, known for his tense relationship with House Lannister and often applying pressure on them, could hardly contain his anger upon learning that the Lannisters were marrying Jenna to Frey's second son rather than the heir. At that time, Rayne had quite the fiery temper. He slammed his hand on the table and stormed out, clearly unable to tolerate it any longer. After all, the Lannister family still held significant power in the Westerlands, and everyone was paying attention to whom their daughter would marry. This was no trivial matter. If she could marry Rayne, that would be ideal. But if she were to marry another noble, especially a family with a poor reputation like the Freys, it would be rather disrespectful. The Freys were merely upstarts with a history of just a few hundred years, and to think they dared to compare themselves to the glory of the Westerlands was truly embarrassing. Meanwhile, Lady Tarbeck heard the news and couldn't help but burst into laughter, finding the whole situation utterly ridiculous. Tywin Lannister's reaction was even more intense, clearly indicating that his perspective on the matter was not to be underestimated. At just 10 years old, as the eldest son of the Laughing Lion Tytos, Tywin stood up without hesitation and expressed his anger and opposition. While the exact words are lost to history, one can imagine he firmly declared, "Jenna is my only sister. How can she marry someone like a Fry? Moreover, he is merely the second son of their house, with no claim to inheritance. This is nothing short of a humiliation for us." Despite the Laughing Lion Tytos' weak character, he insisted that a promise once made could not be broken, and the marriage was set. Tywin's fierce reaction turned his father's face as pale as milk and made Walder Fry tremble. Just imagine a 10-year-old boy with just a few words could make the 44-year-old Walder shake in fear. Such an aura is truly impressive. Despite Tywin's later numerous glorious achievements and victories, I have always felt that the impression left by his words at the age of 10 was the most profound and truly admirable. In this scene, the 7-year-old Gina Lannister, that little girl, recalled this past to her nephew Jaime 50 years later. She told Jaime that Jenna was indeed his aunt. After sharing this, she expressed that from that moment on, she had a special love for her brother Tywin. Although Jenna's account may have been somewhat exaggerated, I want to believe that the reality wouldn't be too far off. Since then, the Rayne and Tarbeck families grew increasingly arrogant, joining forces to bully Tytos, known as the Laughing Lion. The Lannister family not only lavishly spent on the castle's renovations and hired knights to bolster their power, but they also exerted pressure on their neighboring families. The wandering knights and lesser nobles suffered greatly under the bullying of these two prominent families. In fact, 3 families could no longer endure the oppression and directly appealed to the Iron Throne, as if saying, "Since you, the teacher, turn a blind eye to the bullying among students, we will go to the principal." When King Aegon V learned of such happenings in the Westerlands, he ordered Tytos, as the Lord, to address the issue. The Laughing Lion Tytos found himself helpless and had to send his father-in-law, the Earl of House Marbrand, to handle the situation. However, tragically, this earl was killed in the conflict by the combined forces of the two houses. It's simply intolerable, you might say. Subsequently, the two houses sent envoys to apologize and defend themselves, claiming it was not intentional but rather a misunderstanding in the chaos, mistaking them for thieves, and they pleaded for forgiveness. Surprisingly, Tytos chose to forgive, reasoning that since it was not deliberate, it could be overlooked. It sounds like a joke, but this is what actually happened. In the following years, the Westerlands fell into frequent local wars, with over 20 conflicts of varying sizes, leading to utter chaos and rampant rumors, as if it were a boiling pot of porridge. Aegon V sent troops 3 times to suppress the unrest, and the Iron Throne even dispatched cavalry directly to the Westerlands. However, despite his prestige, the situation would descend into chaos whenever he left. Thus, the rule over the Westerlands appeared weak and ineffective, with unrest continually arising beneath the surface. In this context, the Laughing Lion, Tywin Lannister, nearly squandered the family's centuries-old reputation in just one generation. The outbreak of the War of the Nine Penny Kings became a crucial turning point, playing a vital role in the revival of House Lannister. As for why it is called the War of the Nine Penny Kings, it is because across the Narrow Sea, there were 9 influential leaders, each heading their own faction, forming a powerful coalition. As the military forces gathered in Westeros, the flames of war spread to the Stepstones. In this conflict, Mary's Blackfyre tragically lost his life. He was the commander of the Golden Company at the time. When this news reached the Iron Throne, the short Prince Duncan mockingly gave a nickname to the 9 leaders, claiming their crowns were worth only 9 copper coins. Hence they became known as the Nine Penny Kings. Although this war is named the War of the Nine Penny Kings, it did not take place on the mainland of Westeros but rather in the Stepstones. While George Martin does not elaborate much on this, I have often highlighted the significance of this war when discussing Littlefinger's origins and the Blackfyre Rebellion. However, this war is rich in implications, with many subsequent events stemming from it. Today we will focus on West's army and the story of the Tywin Lannister family, which is crucial and revolves around 3 main points. First, the Red Lion Roger of House Rain, whom I mentioned earlier, performed exceptionally well in this war. At that time, West mobilized 11,000 soldiers to the battlefield. Despite facing turmoil within West, they still marched out resolutely when the Iron Throne issued the call to arms, prioritizing the external threat. The leader of this force was Jason Lannister, the brother of the Laughing Lion Tytos. Jason Lannister ultimately fell in battle, and soon after, Red Lion Roger took command of the troop. Although he was not a member of House Lannister, Roger earned widespread respect in Westeros due to his exceptional prestige and personal charisma, becoming the overall commander of Westeros. The performance of the Red Lion was outstanding, and he could even be called the greatest warrior in Westeros. Meanwhile, the 3 younger sons of House Lannister began to show their potential in this war. The eldest son Tywin was only 18 at the time, the second son Kevin was 16, and the youngest Tygett was just 10. When the war broke out, Tywin had just been knighted, while Kevin and Tygett were still squires, with Kevin serving as a squire to Red Lion Roger. After the war, Kevin was finally knighted, receiving the honor of being personally dubbed by Red Lion Roger, which was undoubtedly a significant achievement in his life. However, the only 10-year-old Tygett had yet to become a knight. Nevertheless, his performance in battle was impressive. As a young squire, he single-handedly defeated 4 enemies, which was no small feat for someone his age. Therefore, I believe that among the Lannister family of Tywin's generation, Tygett was the most formidable in combat. Later, Aunt Jenna even remarked to Jaime that there seemed to be a shadow of Tygett in his performance on the battlefield, which speaks volumes about his potential. Unfortunately, Tygett passed away at the age of 25 due to smallpox, leaving behind a child named Tyrion, whose story is well known to attentive readers. During the second volume, Tyrion goes missing. Both Tyrion and Tywin pressure Varys to search for this nephew, but despite their efforts, there is still no trace of him, leading to speculation that he may have met with misfortune or even been killed, becoming a mere ingredient in the stew of the slums. This seems to stray a bit off topic. Let's return to the theme of the War of the Nine Penny Kings. The third key point is Aerys. At that time, Aerys was not yet Aerys. He was merely Prince Aerys Targaryen, just 17 years old, 1 year younger than Tywin. As a squire on the battlefield, although he was the crown prince, he had not yet been crowned king. However, he performed remarkably well in every aspect, exuding charm, and aside from being somewhat lecherous, he had almost no other flaws. After the battle, Aerys was finally able to be knighted. As the crown prince, he had the right to choose anyone to bestow the honor upon him, even the renowned Kingsguard commander Barristan Selmy. However, Aerys chose Tywin Lannister as his knight, as they had established a deep friendship before the war broke out. Tywin had held important positions in King's Landing, which further strengthened his relationship with Prince Aerys. Additionally, Aerys had another friend, Stephen Baratheon, who was only 14 at the time and was the father of Robert, Stannis, and Renly. The friendship among Tywin, Aerys, and Stephen became an undeniable bond in the historical developments that followed. This war triggered a series of profound impacts, and it can even be said that the roots of the War of the Usurper are closely related to it. We will explore these changes in detail later. After the aforementioned War of the Nine Penny Kings, Tywin, Kevan, and Tygett returned to Westeros, and the situation underwent a dramatic transformation. Why do I believe this war was a turning point for the resurgence of House Lannister? Because these three young men were tempered by the trials of battle and grew into true men. Upon returning home, they began to gradually undermine their father, the inept Laughing Lion Tytos. During this war they met many other nobles and realized that the lords across the realm viewed their house as a laughingstock, a humiliation that deeply wounded their hearts. After gathering his forces, Tywin swiftly took decisive measures to reorganize House Lannister. His first step was to form a debt collection group, openly demanding justice from those nobles who refused to repay their debts. He understood well that the act of borrowing without repayment could not be tolerated. Thus, he summoned 500 knights, led by Kevan Lannister. Kevan was not only the practical mastermind behind this operation, but also played a crucial role in it. This knightly company roamed between the castles of the Westerlands, enjoying a life funded by the crown, while those in debt were forced to repay. If they could not repay, they had to provide hostages. Harris Stark, the head of House Stark, ultimately handed over his daughter as a hostage to Kevan, unable to pay the ransom. A few years later, Kevan surprisingly married Shira's daughter. His debt collection efforts led him to House Tarbeck and House Rain, but both families were completely indifferent to his demands. Roose Bolton merely laughed at the situation, as he had a past connection with Kevan as a knight and squire, and thus did not escalate the conflict. However, when Earl Tarbeck learned about the debt collection, he personally traveled to Casterly Rock, intending to confront Tytos and Tywin, thinking to himself that these two weaklings dared to ask him for money. Fueled by anger and ready to teach them a lesson, he was caught off guard when he arrived, as Tywin refused to let him see his father and ultimately had him thrown into the dungeons. Thrown into the dungeon? You might say this is quite impressive, but I actually think it doesn't violate the rights of guests. After all, you came here looking for trouble, so it's only natural for us to capture you, right? You came to cause a ruckus, and you are not our guest, so that kind of host-guest relationship doesn't exist. After the capture, Lady Ellen immediately realized that her husband had been taken, and couldn't let this matter go unresolved. So she captured 3 more Lannisters nearby as hostages. Among these 3 Lannisters, 2 were actually from Lannisport, considered distant relatives of hers, not true Lannisters, while the other was Jason Lannister, who had some familial ties to Tywin's father, Tytos. Jason Lannister's eldest son is named Stafford. When Tywin learned that they had captured someone from the three-headed house and wanted to exchange hostages, he secretly smiled and suggested sending Earl Tarbeck back in 3 pieces. Upon hearing this proposal, Tytos immediately opposed it, as Stafford was his nephew, and he could not disregard his safety. In the end, both sides decided to exchange hostages. Later, Roger Rayne intervened, and the 2 parties exchanged hostages at the Rayne house, even embracing and kissing each other, promising to coexist peacefully in the future. Only Kevin attended this banquet, while Tywin was notably absent. What was the relationship between Kevin and the Redwyne family? However, the situation took an unexpected turn. Within a year, Tywin turned against them once again. His third tactic was to tear off the mask of civility and write letters to both families, demanding they come to Casterly Rock to confess their sins and accuse them of various wrongdoings. Unsurprisingly, neither family was willing to submit, and the situation escalated, bringing war to the brink and completely severing their relationship. In this short span of less than a year, Tywin had not been idle. He secretly placed some of his people within both families. Therefore, when he set off for Tarth with 3,500 soldiers, the number may have seemed small, but it was actually a meticulously planned military operation, especially with the 500 knights who formed the core of his strength. On the way, Tywin joined forces with the Marbrand family and other houses. Although their strength was bolstered, their numbers still remained relatively small. He did not give his vassals much time to gather troops, as both sides appeared to be somewhat weak. Upon arriving at Tarbeck Hall, the Tarbeck family also failed to assemble their forces in time, and the second and third-tier nobles loyal to them were caught off guard. The Earl of Tarbeck, unaware of the gravity of the situation, foolishly led his knights out of the city to confront Tywin directly. Despite having only 300 to 500 knights, they suffered a crushing defeat in the battle against Tywin, with many captured and heavy casualties. Tywin showed no mercy, executing the Earl of Tarbeck without hesitation, demonstrating his decisive and ruthless decision-making. The 2 sons were beheaded, and none of the knights loyal to House Tarbeck were spared. Tywin showed no mercy, disregarding any thoughts of ransom. Execution was the only option. When they reached Tarbeck Hall, Lady Ellen locked herself inside the castle gates, preparing for defense. She believed the ancient fortress was strong enough to withstand an assault for some time. A plea for help had already been sent out, and many were hastily rushing to aid House Tarbeck, including Roger Rayne. However, within less than a day, Tywin had set up siege engines, and with a thunderous crash, the walls collapsed in under an hour. Lady Ellen's youngest son tragically lost his life in this catastrophe, with a traitor secretly aiding Tywin in opening the city gates. Tywin led his army in a relentless surge, mercilessly slaughtering the men, women, and children within the city, ultimately reducing the ancient and noble Tarbeck Hall to ashes with raging flames. Despite Tywin's brutal methods, he had offered Lady Ellen a chance to surrender, but her refusal ultimately led to this tragedy. When the Red Priest Roger arrived, the flames before him had already turned the sky crimson, and he understood that he had once again missed the opportunity to save them. Roger, the Red Priest, though incredibly brave and an outstanding commander, set out on this campaign in haste with only 2,000 men. When he saw that Tywin's army numbered 6,000 or 7,000, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pressure. Although he secretly contemplated a surprise attack, facing such a massive enemy force, Roger's plans did not come to fruition. In the end, he could only lead the remnants of his troops in retreat. During the escape, he was unfortunate enough to be struck by an arrow, sustaining serious injuries, and he fell from his horse not long after. Bearing this pain, he struggled to return to their castle, Casterly Rock. The underground portion of Casterly Rock occupies nearly 9/10 of the entire structure. It is well known that the rich gold and silver mines of the Westlands have made this place a symbol of wealth. The Rain family has mined these treasures for generations, accumulating considerable riches, which is why they have excavated the underground space into a labyrinthine complexity, featuring spacious halls suitable for grand balls and an abundance of bedrooms. Above ground, there is only a ring of walls and a few towers, appearing relatively modest. At this moment, everyone has retreated underground, with only 3 narrow tunnels leading to the outside, equipped with some defensive works, such as murder holes. If the enemy attempts to attack through the tunnels, they can accommodate no more than 2 horses side by side, while arrows can rain down from above at any time. Keep it up. No army can breach our underground fortress. Here we have ample food and water to sustain us for 3 years. Their strategy is merely to force Tywin into negotiations through this method. However, when Tywin arrives, he clearly has no intention of backing down easily. He discovers a small stream and a pond nearby and orders the stream to be diverted into the tunnels, sealing off the exit. Water is a precious resource that should flow back to its source, not be used to poison and suffocate the enemy in this dark space. Their family did not have a proper drainage system and ultimately drowned. Over 300 people, young and old, perished in the water with not a single survivor. Subsequently, Tywin ordered the ground above to be burned to the ground, and the Rain and Tarbeck families vanished from the world. Tywin's methods were ruthless, leaving no trace behind, and even more shocking was that he was only 19 at the time, yet he could execute such a thunderous act, demonstrating his extensive experience in warfare. As a result, his reputation spread rapidly, and even singers composed a song called The Rains of Castamere to please him, which became widely known. In the main film, whenever the Lannister family appears, the background music is the song The Rains of Castamere, along with various adaptations, featuring at least 4 or 5 different versions. The lyrics of this song convey that the Earl of House Rain proudly claims their sigil is a red lion, while House Lannister's is a golden lion. Although both are lions, their colors differ, and he has his own sharp claws. Why should he kneel and submit to House Lannister? He is so proud, exuding arrogance. However, time passes and now, every rainy season, the rain nourishes their halls, yet no living soul remains. Although this song does not depict any battle scenes, it cleverly conveys a chilling atmosphere. I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine, as if goosebumps are quietly blooming on my skin. The song, created by Martin, although its lyrics were conceived independently, undoubtedly showcases his profound literary talent. The allure of this song is simply irresistible. Years later, House Farman of Faircastle attempted to rebel against their rule due to dissatisfaction, and Tywin wasted no time in sending a singer to their castle. When this singer performed The Rains of Castamere within the castle walls, House Farman was instantly subdued. The ability to instill such fear in nobles with just a song makes Tywin truly unique, and this event has since become widely known. It is worth mentioning that Casterly Rock was awarded to House Spicer by Tywin as a reward after the Red Wedding in the main storyline. This was due to a conspiracy between Tywin and Jane Westerling's mother, Cybele Spicer. Their secret collusion led to Robb Stark suffering a devastating defeat, ultimately resulting in the annihilation of his forces at the Whispering Wood. As a result, Tywin not only pardoned House Spicer, but also granted them Casterly Rock. As for Cybele Spicer's brother, Rolf, it was clearly impossible to immediately rebuild the castle. After all, the water had been drained, and the state of the bodies within was unimaginable. Reviving this place would likely require the efforts of several generations. However, it is undeniable that House Spicer had virtually no standing before this event. In this episode, I shared various stories about Tywin Lannister's youth. If time permits in the future, I will also explore the intricate tales that unfolded during his 20 years as Hand of the King in King's Landing. That's all for today's sharing.